Hey guys, Andrew with CPR Instructor Affiliates, powered by Prime Medical Training. We're a national AHA training center, and today we're talking about how to find the right AHA training center. So if you're wanting to become an instructor, or you're already an instructor and you're looking at your options, there is a lot of information out there, and you can easily go and type in something like AHA training centers in Google. Tons of stuff is going to come up. There are a lot of people that are saying, sure, you can come and you can align yourself with us as a training center. You can go on forums and ask questions about how to find a training center, and you're going to get bombarded with training centers who are saying, hey, come and we'll accept you. But really, what are you looking for? What are the things, the hallmarks of a good training center? What are some things that you should be careful of? That's what we're going to be covering today. So let's start first. I don't want to assume that you know what an AHA training center is or why it's important, so we'll start there. An AHA training center is an independent organization that has an agreement with the American Heart Association to provide training and to also oversee instructors who are providing training to students. Now, within that agreement, there are two really important specifications. The first is it'll determine, or it'll specify, what states that training center can operate out of. So for example, a hospital, community college, fire department, generally their agreement is going to tell them that they can only operate within the state that they're in. But then there's other training centers that'll have a regional jurisdiction, and then there's some that will have a national jurisdiction. Prime Medical Training is a national training center, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So that's one thing you should be asking about and looking for, depending on your needs. Now, the second thing that you should know about a training center is that they also have disciplines that they're allowed to teach. So not all training centers can teach all three of the disciplines: BLS, ACLS, and PALS. Those are all interdependent, or they're all independent of each other. So you might have a training center that's only BLS, or only BLS and ACLS, or they might have all three. So that's another question you need to be asking, especially if you're thinking long-term down the road. Maybe you don't need ACLS and PALS now, but in the future you'd like to become an ACLS PALS instructor. You want to pick somebody that you can be with for the long term, because as you grow, it becomes more and more of a hassle to change training centers. Trust me, I know. Done it about 3 or 4 times before we became a training center ourselves. It's just a real big pain. That's what a training center is, some of the parameters that training centers have. Now let's talk about what to look for. The main thing that I always recommend people to do is to look for an entrepreneurial training center. Now, what is an entrepreneurial training center? Well, it just means that it's a for-profit organization, as opposed to like a hospital or fire department or a community college. In the AHA's eyes, those aren't considered entrepreneurial because training, the AHA is not their number one focus. They have a lot of other priorities. And the reason why this is important is because we see this almost on a monthly basis, where a hospital or a fire department changes their budget, or they change their administration, and the new budget or administration says, we don't want to deal with instructors who aren't employees of this organization. So they'll kick out all their instructors. It happens very regularly. And it puts you in a predicament of then having to rush around trying to find another training center, because more than likely you've got classes lined up and you can't teach unless you have a training center that you're aligned with. So it's problematic. Non-entrepreneurial training centers are a lot more volatile. And so aside from the volatility, you also have to recognize that these non-entrepreneurial training centers, like a hospital, for example, their primary mission is patient care. Then they have their secondary missions, which are going to be things like making sure that their staff are properly trained and credentialed. And then they're like way down on the totem pole of priorities are going to be these outside instructors and making sure that they're fulfilling their orders and they're overseeing the training and be responsive to questions and whatnot. As an outside non-employee of a hospital, you are way, way down on their priority list. And so the customer service that you can expect to get a lot of times is going to be less than optimal. So that's why we recommend going with an entrepreneurial training center. Their focus, all they do day in and day out is AHA training. That's what they're committed to. Prime is an entrepreneurial training center. Our reputation, the level of customer service that we offer, these things are really important to the integrity of our business. And so we place a high priority and a high value on making sure that we take very good care of our instructors, and we're not going anywhere because this is what we do. No matter if there's new administration or budget cuts, that doesn't affect, because this is our main mission. And so an entrepreneurial training center, that's who you need to be hooking up with. I highly discourage you from going to an EMS-based training center, fire department, hospital, whatnot. The next thing that you should be looking for is responsiveness. And you can tell this right off the bat. If you contact a training center to show interest in aligning with them, they should pretty readily respond back to you. I would say within 24 hours is a normal time. Here at Prime, our policy is all emails and phone calls have to be responded to within the same day. Even if you don't leave a voicemail, we're going to call back a missed number. So that's our personal policy, but there's some training centers that literally will never call you back, will never email you. And so if it takes like 3 to 4 days, a week, 2 weeks to hear back from a training center about alignment, that should be a red flag of what might come. Like, you eventually get aligned with them. Well, you're wanting to give them your money and they're taking a week to get back to you. Once they've got you hooked in and you're one of their instructors, now what's their incentive to respond to you when you have questions and need answers? So right off the bat, when you're contacting training centers, take into account and weigh heavily how long it takes them to respond to you and how well the communication and rapport is, because that's going to be a strong indicator of what the rest of your relationship with them is going to look like. The third thing that you should be looking for are certification, like how fast it takes somebody to issue certification cards. A lot of training centers, again, will take sometimes weeks, even I've heard of months, to send certification cards either to you or to your students. The AHA requires that a training center issue certification cards 10 days after they receive a roster or an order. And so talk to the training center, ask them how long it's going to take to receive cards. At Prime, when you send in an order to us, we issue those cards within a business day. So we're super fast, and we understand that your students need this for their jobs, for school, whatever. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting our instructors well to make them look good to their students, and so that they can thrive and be successful in whatever it is that they're doing. So we understand that not all training centers get it. In fact, I would say the great majority of them don't provide that level of service. And so make sure you're asking them pinpointed questions about how long it takes to get certification cards and what the process is, which is moving us into our next point, which is systems and processes. Ask them about how you get cards, how you go about getting renewed as an instructor. A lot of training centers don't have good processes in place. It's either very manual or very unorganized. And so they may say, oh yeah, well, you teach a class and then you have to fill out a paper roster and mail it in, or some I've even heard make you bring it in person and you have to pay by cash or check. So when all's said and done, it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before your students are getting their cards because of this very manual paper process that the training center is requiring you to do. Again, here at Prime, it's all online. So you send in an order for cards within a business day, we fulfill that order, your credit card is on file we charge that card. It's just seamless, smooth, and it works well, and it creates a really good experience for you and for your students. So the systems that they have in place are important to analyze. Ask a lot of questions related to that. Ask them, well, who do I talk to about this or that? If it's a part-time person, they have a training center, but they have another full-time job, either on the ambulance or they work in the hospital, take that into consideration too, because that's going to play into their system. They're probably not going to be processing rosters on the days that they're working on the ambulance or working at the hospital. And so I would take that into account. I always kind of look and see, like, if it's a one-man show, it's probably a small business, and it probably is not going to be able to live up to the same customer service level as a training center that has maybe 2 or 3 full-time staff. And it's not that some training centers aren't going to be quality if there's only one person working there. It's just that you can only service people so well when your time is divided and you're working another job full-time. That's just the reality. So again, when you come into systems and processes, asking those kind of questions. So what do you do? Is this your full-time job? As you're talking to the training center coordinator or whoever it is you're talking to, and trying to get some of that insight, that will give you a lot of insight into what that relationship's going to be like and how good of an experience you're going to have once you align with them. I hope this is helpful. I'd be happy to answer questions in the comments below about training centers that you're looking at. A lot of times you just don't know what you don't know. And it might sound great until somebody else, gives you some feedback and says, well, actually, because of this is going to mean X, Y, Z. Or it might sound great, but then you talk to somebody and they say, well, actually, that AHA training center is not compliant with the AHA, which is all over the place. You got to be really careful with that. But again, you don't know that because you're not intimately familiar with the PAM. So if you ever have questions, feel free to email or leave a comment below. I'd be happy to answer and bring clarity to whatever it is that you need. Again, we're also always willing to accept training center or instructors and training sites. And you can find a link below to learn more about our training center, what we offer instructors. Just a few more things to look at. I can't speak for all training centers, but I can at least let you know what we do so that you can have kind of a comparison sheet to compare other training centers to. If you're interested in being a training center faculty, then that means being able to train other people to become instructors or monitor and renew people in their instructor status. That's something that not all training centers offer, but we do. If you're interested in becoming a training site, that's something that we can help you with. And then we also provide a lot of ongoing mentoring and support on a monthly basis via Zoom calls and one-on-one conversations and private mentoring sessions. And then also you can ask about discounts. So we have corporate discounts through WorldPoint, and we pass that on to our instructors. And you create your own account, and then we just give you the discount code, and then it applies to all of your product purchases. Again, not all training centers will give you their corporate discount and share that with you. So these are just a few more things that you can take into consideration as you're trying to determine which training center you want to be with. Another thing to ask them about is whether or not you're allowed to post on the AHA's Class Connector. That's a special site where you can post classes that you're teaching. The AHA posts them onto their site where people then can go and search and find classes in their area. Not all training centers allow you to post publicly your classes on the AHA network because one, either they don't want the competition, or two, they don't like when you post it onto the Class Connector, the training center's information shows up there as well, and they don't like students calling them directly about a class that you're offering. And so they just, to not have to deal with that, they just make a policy that says you're not allowed to post on the AHA Class Connector, which is a real shame because you can get a lot of business through that. So I hope I gave you a good list of questions to ask, and now you're more informed and know what is and what isn't available to you as an instructor. Again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Andrew, CPR Instructor Affiliates, powered by Prime Medical Training.